Hi, it's James. I'm single and I'll be retiring soon. Sadly not soon enough that I don't have to think about the potential return to work that's happening very soon. Well, certainly here in the UK, as the government lifts the restrictions on what we're allowed to do and what we can do, certain offices are going to want us to come back to the office to carry on our work. Now, for some that means just relocating what they've been doing at home to be doing in the office. For others it means that furlough is finished and there's a lot to think about. I think if we get ahead by thinking of some things now, rather than wait till it's almost time to go back to the office, we can get ourselves prepared. We can be one step ahead of the bulk of the people, and things which may be in short supply, we may be able to get our share of. So here's 5 things that's worth thinking about before we return to the office. Pretty practical, but let's have a look at the video and see. One of the first things you're going to want to think about is when you're going back to the office. You need to be in contact with the management of the office and start to find out what their plans are for bringing people back. Now, there's some companies who have said that they're not bringing the people back at all, that people are free to work from home for the rest of the time. Some pretty big companies as well. Other companies are expecting their staff to be back in the office, but maybe not full time. 3 days a week, maybe 4. Some only 2. Some are a bit flexible on that. Others, like many city firms I've heard, are going to want the staff back 5 days a week as they were before the start of the COVID. So the first thing to do is find out from your management when you're going to be expected to be in the office and from what date. Having a target date helps us focus on what practical matters we must undertake and when, and getting people lined up. The other thing to think about is how many days you are going to do in the office. Things are very different whether you're doing part-time in the office and part-time at home, or whether you're doing full-time in the office. Very practical differences on those 2 things. Another thing to think about is, what's the plan for everybody going back to the office? Is everybody going to return in the same day? Or are management going to stagger over some weeks or months so that we don't have chaos in the first day? The final thing to ask management about is what changes have been made to things like desks and that sort of stuff while we've been away. For many, the desks have been spread out, much thinner than they were before we left, meaning that we may not have our own personal desk anymore. It may become a drop-in desk. These sorts of things are actually stuff worth thinking about, getting yourself mentally prepared for, so that when you arrive in the office on day 1, you have at least some idea about what it's going to be like and where you're going to put your stuff, and practical things that up to now have never been in consideration. The other thing is, are there any prerequisites for the office building or for the office itself? Do you need to have vaccinations? Do you need to have 1 vaccination, 2 vaccinations? How are you going to prove whether you have or not? If you don't need vaccinations, does that mean you're going to get tested every day? Remember, one of the practical things about the lateral flow test is that it takes half an hour for the results to come through, or up to half an hour. And you need to know what you're going to be doing during that half an hour. Are you going to be kept in the lobby? Are you going to be segregated somehow and then called out one by one? The important thing is not to arrange any meetings during that half hour, or arrange to you commute so you arrive that half hour early. And don't assume you're going to be the only person in the queue waiting to get a COVID test. It's all very practical. It's going to be very different. It needs adjustment. So now we understand what the office is going to look like, and how many days are expected to turn up, and what our start date is. What the next thing you have to do is get practical with your commute. Things aren't going to be as they were before. Many people commute long distances by train, other people commute short distances by bus. You need to allow for the fact there's going to be fewer seats on these trains and buses, that actually buses and trains might go past and you're not going to be allowed to get on them. Now for trains, that's the practical outcome of that. Maybe you have to reserve your seat. You may have to travel at a different time than you would have previously. And the same thing's true for buses. New timetables. There's been new rules about how many people can actually squeeze into a train or a bus, and whether you need to wear masks. So the thing about that is too many people and too few seats. Yes, you can maybe stagger your start in the morning, go a bit early, go a bit late, but usually, about 5 o'clock, everybody's going to pile out of the office at the same time, all aiming for the same trains, all aiming for the same buses. It's going to be actually quite late before we get back home in many instances. So the practical arrangements for that. What happens if you actually can't get in the morning in a reasonable time? What happens if every bus, every train goes past you and you're not allowed to get in? And it's one of the days you're expected to get into work. What do you do about that? Can you take the time off? Can you work from home then? You have to let your management know. What will they think about it? What about customers? If you've got clients coming in to see you, how are you going to let them know? It's the whole commute thing is going to be a big nightmare, I think, and many people are going to find it on day one. Also, you need to consider in a very practical way whether you're going to renew your season ticket. If you're going to go into the office 2 days a week, 3 days a week, is it more practical to pay on a daily basis, a weekly basis, rather than an annual basis? These sort of practical, how am I going to get there? What am I going to do if I can't? What am I going to do if I'm late home? Who's going to look after the children? All those sorts of things are things that you're going to be needing to think about right now. It's going to make a big difference, isn't it? The next thing to think about for many people, having got those other two things, at least the thoughts and train, so you're going to know what days you're going to be away from in the office, what days you're going to be at home, and how you're going to get there and what times those are. Then you need to think of practical things like, and this is number 3, childcare. Should that be required? If you're going to have to leave for the office early in the morning, earlier than you used to, or arrive home later than you used to, how are you going to cover that? One of the sad facts about COVID is that many businesses haven't made it through COVID, and you need to check with your previous childcare arrangements that they're still practical. Whether it's a creche which may have actually folded due to the lack of income over the COVID period, or whether it's even grandparents who may sadly have passed on during the COVID period. What used to work for your childcare arrangements may no longer. Schools may not be so content to keep children late, just allow you to come home. Very practically, you can't be quite sure what time you're going to get home. How are you going to cope with the children? How are the children going to cope without you, that commute? Of course, up to now, I've just been talking about childcare. It may not be childcare. It could be parental care, grandparental care. Perhaps something you've taken on during the period of COVID that is going to prove less practical when you go back to the office. Who's going to look after them? And maybe it's not even a person, maybe it's your pets. Lots of people have bought dogs and things like that during the COVID period while they've been at home. How's the dog going to cope when you're not there? Is it going to be a nuisance to the neighbours? All practical things that have to be thought of under this big umbrella of caring. You need to get it right. You only get really 1 or 2 chances at this. Really, if it interferes with your work, what are you going to do? So the next thing to do, once you've got all that done and you know when you're going back and you know how you're getting back and you know all that sort of stuff and your care arrangements, you need to think about, get practical with yourself. I guess like a lot of us, we've got the COVID punch. Does your suit still fit? Does whatever your office clothes are, skirt and shoes, blouse, do they all still fit? Does your shirt still fit around your collar? Very practically, are you going to have to go out and buy some new clothes just to go back to work? And think about your style. Has it changed since you were last in work? But also think about practical things like your hair, having it done, having your beard trimmed, having it, maybe consider taking it off again, so that things aren't so very different when you go back into the office. Even practical things like nails and hands, and for men and for women both. You know, I've been working in the garden a lot, and my hands are a little bit sort of rougher now than they should be, so maybe I'm starting to think about putting moisturiser on them at night just to get them softer a little bit again, you know. Worry about my nails, whether there's dirt under them, that sort of stuff. All the things that didn't matter so much when you were working actually from home. And the offices have changed. The people are going to have changed. You can change. What is it you want to be? What is it you want to present? And you know, there's nothing wrong in presenting like a new boy, a new girl, the new one at the office. You can be different. You can be, as long as it's within the dress code, and check that, because some offices will have changed the dress code, some offices will relax some offices will tighten, but you'd want to make sure that you feel comfortable being there, other people feel comfortable being around you, and it's not a minute, it's not, you know, squeeze into it at the last minute, because that's just not going to work, is it? Take the time now, get yourself sorted, the clothes you're going to wear, get them, know what they are, so you don't have a panic on the last day. So, we're sorted. We know what days we're going back to the office. We know how we're going to get there. We know all these good things about what we're going to wear and all this sort of stuff. And what I would say is, for number 5, practice the daily routine. Because it's only by practicing it at least once that you're going to find out where the holes in it are. Yeah, so you get up in the morning at the time you're supposed to get up, and find out what happens, how your day flows. It's not going to be as it used to flow, because, well, everything's different. You know, parents have moved in, children have moved out. You're going to have to find a different time train. You're going to have to find a different bus. You're going to have to walk. You're going to have to consider cycling. It's been so long that we've actually forgotten what a daily commute can be like, and it has its effect on ourselves and those are the things that we care for, those people we care for, those animals we care for. All have to get used to the fact that there's a new routine around, and the new routine can involve things like not just in the morning after school care. You know, are we going to need more help? Are we going to need people there who haven't needed before? You know, reliance on grandparents may no longer be practical for lots of reasons. So a long time without having to perform the duties may mean that grandparents are no longer quite so willing to do it. And, you know, in a very sad way, maybe they're not there anymore. Yeah, practice your daily routine. Practice getting up and see that actually things link together the way you think they're going to. Who's going to take the kids to creche? Who's going to make sure that they get to nursery or to school? Who's going to be there to welcome them home in the evening? Or where are they going to go if it's not to grandma's anymore? Yeah, practice your daily routine. Only by doing it will you find out where the gaps are. And that's not just in the morning routine, but also the evening routine. How's that going to work? Make sure it does. So 5 very practical ways that we can actually get ready for going back to the office or back to the workplace. It's not going to be the same. COVID has been harsh on the world, and we've been soft on ourselves. We've allowed ourselves to take our time. We've allowed the grass to grow under our feet. And it's time now to face up to that requirement to go back to the office. They pay our wages. We have to do it. Much as we've proved that we can work from home, it's not practical on it for every single day. But tell you what, action taken now, before the day itself, is always going to be to the good. We start to focus on outside ourselves, away from our homes and the comforts and the pleasures we've had of working from home, towards the actual practical thoughts of commuting, of buses, of rain, of hail, of going out at that time of the morning, whatever the weather is, whether it's light or whether it's dark. We have to start getting back into thought of that. We're so lucky that we're going back in spring. You know, it's a beautiful time to be out in the morning. It's got all the joys of spring, perhaps, but you know, spring has its rain as well. Spring has its problems just as much as summer and winter do. However it goes for you, though, I trust that it goes well and that you have as much of it as stress-free as you can. But remember, other people in the office may not be as unstressed as you are. Give them a little bit of space, the sort of space you'd like them to give you, just to get used to the fact you're all back together in one place. Welcome the new people that have joined since you've last been there. In practical terms, you're going to have to find these things together. You're going to have to find out how it's going to work going to your canteen or to your restaurant, or how lunchtime is going to work, how social distancing is going to work. Support the people who have got all that and for the first time meeting new people. So in a practical way, be kind to yourself, be kind to them, be kind to each other, and be kind to the world. It's the only world we've got. Whether we're back at the office or not, look after it.